أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا وأولاده المعصومين حجج الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. صلوات.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن، الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وبارك على محمد وآل محمد وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كأفضل ما صليت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد فعال لما تريد. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل واتباع أمره واجتناب نهيه. The days that we are commemorating right now are related to the 40th of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This marks the 40th day after the martyrdom of the Imam, after the tragedy of Karbala had occurred. And we can see that the processions are happening around the world. People walk out on the streets, people have majalis, they have commemorations. And if you look at what's happening in Karbala, there are millions and millions of visitors that are going there. Now a person asks himself or herself this question: what is it that draws the people to this? What is it that makes people want to travel all these distances, spend all this time, walk on this path? People walk from city to city, and other people host people for free. They give them food, they give them shelter, they give them water. If you think about it, and think about other societies, this is not something that happens in a normal situation. Nobody opens up their door to random strangers, thousands of them, millions of them. You let them into your house, you give them food. But there's something to contemplate. It's not just something that we admire and we say, oh, this is very nice. Because such an event doesn't occur in a natural situation. If you look around the world, how many events gather people to this extent? How many events around the world? We have 6 billion humans. Now they're a bit more than that. And throughout the history of humanity, we have a lot of places where people gather, where people get together, where events happen, sports events and things like that. But nothing of this nature. This nature sort of goes against the natural laws that we have as human beings. So we have to think about it in a more deeper way. in a more contemplative way. And I was thinking about the story where Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, the companion of the Prophet who went to Karbala after the tragedy happened, and the story, I'm sure most of you have heard of it, when he went with Atiyah and they visited the graves of the Imams after the tragedy happened. He says something that's very interesting. He tells Atiyah, or he speaks to the Imam alayhi salam, after saying, Assalamu alaikum ayyuha al-arwahu allati hallat bifina al-Husayn, he sends his regards to those who have been martyred with the Imam, and he testifies that they have aqamtum as-salah, they've established prayer, ataytum az-zakat, and that you've done good, and that you've established the prayers, you have paid zakat, and so on and so forth. Then Jabir says, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَ مُحَمَّدًا بِالْحَقِّ نَبِيًّا لَقَدْ شَارَكْنَاكُمْ فِي مَا دَخَلْتُمْ فِيهِ. He says, by the one who has sent the Prophet Muhammad as a messenger or a prophet, we have accompanied you, or we've been your partners in what you have done. So Atiyah looks at Jabir and says, wait a second, Jabir, how come you're saying this? We didn't lift a sword. We didn't fight with them. They spent their lives. They gave their lives. They died. They fought in the battle. They shed their blood. We're over here standing alive. How are you saying that we're partners with you in this? So Jabir responds to him. He says, Ya Atiyah, سمعت حبيبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول من أحب قوما حشر معهم ومن أحب عمل قوم أشرك في عملهم أو أشرك في عملهم. He says, Atiyah, I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam one day say that whoever loves a people, then he will be resurrected with them. And whoever loves the actions of an individual, then he becomes a partner with that person, just because of loving what that person is doing. If you see someone doing something good, and you love that they're doing that good thing, then you take a share of that goodness as well. And this took me to this idea to think about the religion of Islam. It really revolves around this notion of love. What Islam tried to establish for humanity is to create this loving relationship between humanity. That people base their relationship with other people on love, especially between believers. And when we look at the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, in one of the ziyaras, when we speak about him being the son or the heir of Adam alayhi salam, the heir of Nuh alayhi salam, the heir of Moses, when it comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we say that the Prophet is described as Habibullah, the beloved one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a title that he had that was special for him because his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was based on love. And this is what he tried to transmit into the hearts of the believers. If we look at the ahadith that we have that speak about love, not just with those who are good with you, but even with your enemies, even dealing with those who harm you, it should be done out of love. A person who is a believer should be that person who gives security and love to other people. You always have to be elevated above others in the society. You shouldn't be always on the same level as them. For example, in a hadith, Imam Ali alayhi salam, in his wasiyah, his will to his son Muhammad bin al-Hanafiyyah, he says, it's a long will, but I want to take one portion of it. He says that make sure that you have love for other people and be patient with what people ask you for. If they have needs, if they have some problems, if they have things to come and ask you for, be patient with them. And if you have a friend, then make sure you spend on that friend time, energy, money to increase your friendship with them. And not just money, but also yourself, your time. And then he says, and for your enemy, you must be just, and you must listen to them. And this is the type of mentality that the Imams have tried to instill in our hearts. That as a mu'min, I don't behave like other people. If I engage in a conversation with somebody and that person has a very bad attitude with me, it doesn't justify that I respond to them in the same way. Because at the end of the day, a mu'min is supposed to be up. And if that person is down in their behavior, then I shouldn't be the one who's going down to them. I should be the one who elevates them to my level. And we have a lot of hadith that indicate this. That by showing mercy towards our enemies, by showing justice towards our enemies, that will make even our enemies respect us. So this is a mentality that the Imams have been trying to instill in our hearts. In another hadith, the Imam ﷺ says that when you're with people, speak to them about things that they like. And don't discuss things that bother them. Sometimes you think, you're sitting in a gathering and you're with, other people. You have to try to keep the atmosphere there in a good way. Don't try to find things that trigger other people. You can have a discussion. You can have, differences in opinion. But there's some people that try to trigger others' emotions. They kind of get a, good feeling out of that. This is not supposed to be what a believer does. Another hadith, Imam ﷺ says, when you speak with people, don't be a judgmental or blameworthy individual. If you do that many times, then you're going to create disharmony between you and others. And that will lead to anger and enmity with other people. And if you do it so much, that's from su' al-adab. It's from bad ethics or bad morality or bad behavior. A lot of times, we have friends, we have people. We always tend to talk with them, even in relationships. You see someone doing something that you don't like, you criticize it. You're very critical. You're always a critical individual. The Imam says if you're very critical to people, then that's going to cause disharmony between you, and that's going to lead to enmity and bad feelings, evil feelings between each other. And it's from su' al-adab to be an overcritical person. Try to see the good things with individuals. Try to see the nice things. It's okay to criticize things. But to be overcritical, and we all know this because we know people like that. Sometimes we engage in this type of behavior as well. But we have to remind ourselves that just because something is not the way we like it, doesn't mean that we have to vocalize that all the time, especially with one individual. If we keep putting them down, we keep criticizing what they're doing, at the end of the day, that person is not even going to fix themselves. They're just going to build hatred towards us. In another narration, this is the opposite now, how to make people attracted to us and how to make people love us. The Imam ﷺ says, حُسْنُ الْخُلُقِ يُنْبِتُ الْمَوَدَّةِ. Good ethics. If you want people to love you, then you have to be a person with good ethics, with good morality. Your behavior with them, because love is not something they acquire by purchasing. It's not something where you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to love everybody and I want everyone to love me. It's something that you have to acquire. Your behavior either attracts people or repels people. So love is supposed to be a goal that we achieve between us as humans, but it needs to be worked on. So there's negative things that we have to stay away from, such as being overcritical, being someone who has evil thoughts about people. In a hadith, and Imam Ali in a hadith says that those who think evil about those who are around him, at the end of the day, he's going to repel people from himself. Because he can't think good of anybody. He's never going to have any friends. He's never going to have anyone who he can hang around with or build a relationship with. Because you're always having evil thoughts about that other individual. On the contrary, the Imam says, if you have good thoughts about people, then you're going to have more friends. Why? Because you don't see the faults in them. You want to hang out with them, you want to talk with them, you're always focusing on the good inside of them. If you focus on the evil, you end up with nobody in society. In another hadith that is related to the etiquettes of the individual and how that would bring love, the Imam says that tawadu, humility. If you're an arrogant person, that repels people. People don't like arrogant people. They don't want to be with them. They don't feel that they can get close to them. So the idea is that Islam focused on love as being the criteria that a mu'min has to establish in his relationship between those who are around that individual and between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. that the best form of worship that you can have is that worship of love, that relationship of love. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam in one hadith, he was asked about love, and he said, is religion anything but love? So we have to change this mentality that we have, even our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to love us, then we have to think good of Him. We have to build that relationship. We have to speak with Him. We have to try to be good individuals with ourselves and with other people and with Him. This is supposed to be our ultimate goal. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الأول بلا أول كان قبله والآخر بلا آخر يكون بعده الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على خاتم النبيين محمد وسيد المرسلين وصل يا رب على علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى الحسن والحسين سيد شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين اللهم صل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة القائم المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والذابين عنه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. One of the things that we notice in our societies that's changing is this movement towards things that are described as spiritual, things that create harmony in our lives. And we can label these under different categories. So for example, if we look at the things that we use as coping mechanisms with our problems in our lives. On one hand, we have drugs that we can take, right? So there are certain pills that people take, antidepressants, let's say, for example, narcotics, even, smoking weed, or physical things that we can take, substances basically. We take those and use those as coping mechanisms. They help us through our difficult lives, our challenges, our depressions, or things like that, right? So these are things that were created, they're physical, and our societies, they consume them in general because they see that life in itself is a difficult thing. Naturally, we have challenges in this life. I mean, the idea of just surviving in this world is a very challenging thing. Waking up in the morning, our body doesn't have a pause. It demands food, it demands drink, it demands oxygen, you have to move. There's a million things going on inside of our body alone that we have to cope with. And on top of that, we have the demands of a family or the demands of society. We have schooling that we have to go to. We need a job. If you're a child, you're growing, you have to learn, you have to go to school. If you're an adult, you have a million responsibilities. And as societies expand and they move forward with technology, our societies are becoming much, much, much more complicated. If you think like back in the day, maybe 100, 200 years ago, society was not as complex as it was now. And if you go farther back than that, what are the things that you had in your life that were, occupying you? You had a family, you had a house, maybe you had a tent, you had an animal to feed. And life was more simplistic at that time. Nowadays, there are so many things that we are occupied with that it's overwhelming. And people aren't able to cope with this because as human beings, we only have 2 eyes. We only have 2 hands. We have a limitation for what we can do. We're not AI robots where we can, just go on, ask any question, and they can answer or they can compute so many different things at one time. Humans are not robots. We don't have this capacity to function in that way. But the weight that's being put upon us as human beings is the weight of robots. We're being treated as if we're just machines, but we can't keep up with it, right? So humans realize that there's this limitation, and they move towards developing things that would function in that way, because we're not going to be able to. We have a limit. We can only reach this point. So they'll develop AI, they'll develop robots, they'll develop things like that, because where the human stops, this will take over and will continue. Because of this, we feel that the burden is increasing on us. We're unable to have stable relationships. We're unable to function daily without taking pills. I mean, almost everybody I know cannot function throughout the day without taking some sort of, I won't say one pill. I know like they take multiple pills a day. Or maybe smoking weed. Or maybe doing something. And you feel like if they don't do this, they're going to explode. They're going to be people who are unable to contain their anger, and they either harm themselves or harm other people. Now, when it comes to us as a Muslim society, how do we function when it comes to something like this? What do we resort to? Well, first of all, we have to understand that we cannot deny reality. If we live in a society like this, we can't say that, no, we're not living in it. We can't say that, no, everything is perfect. Especially if, when it comes to parents and their children, you can't draw this, beautiful picture in your mind that's an imagination and think that my child is not going through this. If you understand society, then you have to understand that your children are going to grow into this, and they're going to go through these challenges and difficulties. So your focus has to be on how to cope with these things. And this is the most minimal level of survival that we have. Coping. When it comes to Islam, the idea is not only to cope with the difficulties of life, but if you look at programs that are being proposed to people. So let's say the drugs or the weed and the physical substances, that's what they do. They have a temporary effect on the self, and then they go away. So you have to take them again. Now there are other methods that people resort to that are more holistic, let's say, that don't involve substances. And these are things like meditation. People say go do sports. People say, do yoga, and things of this sort. So these are non-physical. They're not substances that you take, but these are more long-lasting effects. It's more internal work, and you're not altering any chemicals in your body in order to feel better. You're going for a more permanent or long-lasting change. Now, as a believer, what is our approach to this as believers, as a Muslim community? How do we look at life when it has these challenges? Our understanding is that these things, a person is good for him or her to be able to cope with the challenges around them so that they can function normally and not harm themselves or harm other people. But the idea that Islam wants to do for the individual is that it wants that individual not only to cope with things, but to create an internal change in that individual and move that individual towards perfection. This is a difference between meditation, let's say, and between a concept that religion has as prayer. Now, religion does have notions such as meditation. It has tafakkur, ta'ammul, and I think all of you are familiar with these things. But these are only used as tools, as a means. So I know a lot of people that do yoga. I know a lot of people that meditate. I know a lot of people that smoke weed. I know a lot of people that, exercise and do all this stuff. And basically, the common thing that combines these together is that what they try to do is they try to just cope with their daily problems. I wake up in the morning, I do my yoga session so that I can have a good day at work. In the middle of work, I might take a little break. I'll do a little exercise. Maybe I'll do another yoga session so that I can continue and remove the stress that I had. And this is something that's very good. It's not a bad thing. To be able to remove that stress, to be able to cope, it's good because we don't want a bunch of angry people, with all this frustration and stress walking around each other. That's not a good thing, right? The more you can calm yourself down, the more safe it is as a society to have, you walking around and roaming around other people. However, we have to understand that we shouldn't mix the concepts together. So Islam would recommend you to do tafakkur. It would recommend you to do meditation. But it tells you at the same time that meditation and yoga, well, Islam doesn't say yoga, that's a Hindu practice, but even the Western version of it is not the Hindu because it was related to the Hindu religion. The Western concept usually rids the practice from any religious meaning, and it makes it happen in a secular way. So the main objective of yoga was to reach that spiritual liberty. Over here, it's more like coping. But Islam doesn't present that. It presents other concepts, such as salat, such as moving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a journey. The idea in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الْإِنسَانِ إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَى رَبِّكَ كَدْحًا فَمُلَاقِيهِ, that you are laboring towards your Lord in a very difficult way. But the idea is that you're moving. There's a journey that you're on. You're not just standing still and trying to cope with things. So tafakkur is good. And meditating is good. Coping is good. But you don't want to stay stagnant. You don't want to have an objective in your life where I'm going to stay the way I am and I'm just going to try to cope with my life daily, on a daily basis. No. I want to do that. That's the first step. The first step is to be able to cope with things. The first step is to be able to control my emotions and desires and not to be someone who has a lot of frustrations in himself or herself. But after that, I have to have an aim that I'm moving towards. I have to develop as a human being. I have to change the way I behave with other people. I have to become a better individual. Spiritually, I need to move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is perfection. I want to perfect myself. So it's not just enough to have a daily life of wanting to cope with things, but rather we should use that as a beginning, as a means to make us grounded, to make us be able to move on this journey. So it's just like, if you have that balance rope, right? If, I'm sure you've seen the people that want to walk on that rope with the balance stick. Well, first you have to balance yourself. If you're not balanced, you can't walk on the rope. So these tools, exercising, meditating, doing these things, they're tools. They're means to make you balance. But they don't move you on the journey. You have to move yourself. You have to move towards the goal that you have. So this is one idea that we have to keep in mind as mu'mineen. That if we engage in this, we shouldn't think that, okay, well, religion preaches, salat and things like that, and on the other hand, there's meditation and yoga, and they serve the same purpose. They don't serve the same purpose. One of them is more of the introductory to the other, the prerequisite to the other. And this is something that we have to keep in mind. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick announcement. We start selling tickets for Mecca's second annual community dinner that would happen next month, inshallah. So if you